totally different world that we're operating in, but we are where we're at, and we've got a first-class facility, and we just need to make sure that we're doing the right thing there. I think along with that too that you know, what we're trying to do now, really, and this is not our job on the business side. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're a citizen. You're a parent. You're part of a volunteer task force. But you know what we've been. And let me say this: last week, a lot of the counselors weren't here, but last week and this week with this presentation is the most progress that we've made, and it's all been good. And I've been looking for this kind of stuff as well. But what we've been asked basically to do is go into the general fund and go deep in the reserve and come up with an hour plan and move forward. Well, we can't do that. Number one, it's going to make his job extremely difficult because he's got a task now to get us back over that 60-day mark. Instead of digging a deeper hole, I think it's very challenging to try to make that decision. So we are doing everything we can to try to come up with the right plan, the least impact to the city at this point. And I think now that I feel confident, I think we can get it done and meet the needs of the swim community. So again, I want to thank you and others. I believe Dr. Wardsley is going to come up and speak in a little while. Is that right, Mr. City Manager?
Well, actually, Deputy City Manager Hodge is going to speak. Dr. Worsley is on an expense paid by Knight Foundation trip to Chicago with the Community Foundation, Betsy Covington, and a few other people trying to get a $5 million grant for Columbus. So, but Deputy City Manager Hodge is going to talk about funding options tonight for the Aquatic Center.
Did you say what kind of grant?
Knight
Cities.
Cities.
Knight grant. Okay. All right. I thought it was 5. Did you say 5 million?
5 million.
Per city.
Well, I sure hope he comes back. I sure hope he comes back with that. I sure hope he comes back with that armored car. But thank you again.
Thank you.
So we are going to continue this conversation.
Yes.
All right, let's see. Now we have Councilor Barnes.
Brian and Task Force, I am impressed by all the work, obviously, that you all have done with this here. And you know, it's as I said at the first meeting, I didn't think that the swim community was any less than a quarter individuals involved in tennis. Knew there was enough individuals in the swim community to come up with options. And I will say again, the natatorium, in my opinion, is that venue has the largest net to capture people in the community, more than tennis, more than golf, or any of it, because I see people of all classes, nationalities, socioeconomic groups going there. So I know there are some people on council may not agree with me, but everybody's got an opinion. But I mean, there's so many things, and I tell you what piqued my interest, that kayaking lessons in the pool. I like something like that. I will not do it whitewater with that cut bait. But things like this here, you're thinking outside the box, and these are this is the type of input that that I was really looking for and knew that y'all could really generate. So, and then stepping out and reducing the hours. This shows a lot of interest of doing something to really keep the natatorium functional in this community.
Thank you.
And as Gina alluded to, you know, there are other avenues. There are children that they don't know how to swim, and outreach to schools and other areas. So I'm just ecstatic of the amount of work that y'all have done, you and the task force. Appreciate y'all.
Well, thank you. On that point, maybe just reiterate the Learn to Swim program with the local schools in this area. That has enormous promise, enormous potential to grow. And as far as what it's not about competitive swimming, but that is truly helping children swim. That could at some point, you know, save their life or somebody else's life.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Councilor Allen.
And I would just interject to say that the Learn to Swim program, you may recall, is a program that's sponsored by Aflac. And so it's a great program, and we want to just make sure we acknowledge them for making that program possible.
Thank you.
Well, since
Counselor
you
Allen?
mentioned Aflac, I would love to take credit for that, but all the credit goes to Brian. I mean, he's the one that got the program off the ground and started it, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you. But the Parks and Rec, they came to us with that opportunity. So, thank you.
And,
Teamwork.
I just
Yeah.
wanted you guys to know or
Yeah.
recall that so that we can thank them when we see them for that. Yeah.
Again, Brian, without being too redundant of what's already been said, I too appreciate you and the work that the task force has done, and I hope you continue to do that. The other one question I had was regarding the hours of operation. Is there an amount of time that a pool needs to be shut down so that it can recycle, refresh, or whatever the term is? I mean, I know we were talking about closing Sunday. Is that the amount of time, or is there a time?
I honestly don't know that answer. I think if you kept it open with people in it 24 hours, there would be a time when it would impact the operation of that. Holly probably knows more about that than I do, or one of the coaches here may know more about that than I do. But if it was closed on Sunday, that wouldn't impact it. I think that would neither hurt nor help the engines, the maintenance of the pool. But you would require less chlorine to be used during that time. The utilities would be reduced during that time. But I don't think it would neither hurt nor help from that regard.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, and thank the members and the support group that you have
Thank
with you
you.
for this work. This is exactly what I was looking for. Next question is for the city manager. Is there an RFP process that
Sure.
Dr. Worsley is working on?
Well, let me just say, and Director Hodge, Deputy City Manager Hodge will come around. We have gone through an entire RFP process, and that process we completed that process, I guess, a month or two ago. Since the first presentation here, the option was to come and talk to you more about it, whether it's internal, external, or go ahead and put on my agenda to ask you to approve the vendor. And we chose to have more discussion, and the vendor is on hold. But the vendor has been vetted, gone through the evaluation committee, identified, and ready to bring forward for your approval. And but Deputy City Manager Hodge will briefly mention that when she comes up to talk in just a few minutes.
Okay. That was my follow-up question, was if the process is complete, or how long are we going to have to wait for it? But you've answered that question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, if the council were interested in forming an authority similar to what we have in other parts of the city, how would we go about that? And I think it goes to the presentation that we've heard, having sort of a three-legged stool operating with some oversight. We have that I think at the Trade Center and the Golf Authority.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like that might be a fit here. So you want time to think through that and try to get some information
Well,
for
just
us?
mechanically, all you have to do is set up a board or an authority and give it certain powers and duties and pass an ordinance. I mean, that's what we did with the Golf Authority, Trade Center Authority, but you need to think about powers and duties, what you want it to do.
Since this is, I guess we're entering new waters, no pun intended, but would it be appropriate for us to hand that type of work over to the task force and allow them to work with council to try to develop something, a model that would be
That's perfectly appropriate. You've got a good private working group, advisory group. They can come up with all sorts of recommendations, including formation of an authority Most of them have 5 to 7 members, but whatever you want to go with as a supervisory body.
Okay. Would that be something that y'all would, I think there's a next step that the task force needs to move to. And I think once we have this defined, council's going to be talking about the other side of this, but it might be something that would fit.
We never discussed an authority, but I think by evidence of the enthusiasm and the efforts of the task force, there would be support to continue. There would be support from that group to continue supporting the aquatic center and whatever is necessary to do so.
Okay. Well, I would like to ask for that. I don't know how all counselors feel, but I would like to ask, maybe we could.
Well,
Take it as a referral.
it's something that you can explore. Like Corda, for example, has a 501c3 organization
And we talked about that.
that works pretty well as a private group. But if you want an authority that's a publicly appointed board, you can have that, and you can have that in conjunction with a private 501c3. So there are different ways.
Yeah, maybe the next step would be, maybe y'all talk about it, and we can get some information
Okay.
and try to,
We'll take that back.
all right, okay,
Okay.
all right.
And
Thank you.
Absolutely. And the mayor pro tem just asked if an authority can raise private money like a 501c3. So that would be one of the questions maybe to address.
Well, most people probably prefer to donate to an entity that they know is a 501c3 organization like Corda. So that's why initially we had thought this group, it would benefit them to have a 501c3 arm. But if you have an authority which is actually part of the city, anybody can also donate to the city government, you know.
And it's tax deductible.
And it's tax deductible. If you, both are.
Are you saying we would have to have a separate, it wouldn't be an authority like?
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Sorry.
I'm sorry. It wouldn't be an authority like we understand or have been working with, like the Trade Center or the Golf Authority. It would be, you're saying we would organize a different entity that would have a 501c3.
Well, I think privately, they could organize a 501c3 similar to Corda. That's
Okay.
not controlled or supervised by the city. They work in conjunction with Parks and Rec every day, but they are an independent, private 501c3.
But
He's just
we
saying it's
could
two
still
ways.
form,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
He's just saying there's two different ways you could do it. Yeah.
Right.
But we could do the 501c3 avenue to be able to receive the funds, and then you could have the authority
You can have both.
to govern the process.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll take that action back.
Counselor Henderson?
Very briefly, I just want to add my thanks. And I was one of the ones, along with Councilor Barnes, that were very interested in seeing a separate advisory group developed, and you guys have done a great job. And I thank Councilor Allen for bringing up the issue about an authority. I think that one of the challenges is you guys come up with some very innovative and frankly quite ungovernmental ways to try to address some of these issues. I think maybe an authority might be the appropriate buffer so that they can filter these things through, because so often in government, I think because we have done things in one fashion for so long and necessarily so, the short answer is usually no, we don't do it that way. And that's not a knock on anybody, it's just the way the governmental wheel turns. So I think an authority makes great sense, at least for you guys to vet. And I think maybe a combination of the two. One quick question, though. In your studies, did you note of these other pools that you guys kind of polled, are they typically run by the local municipality, or are they run by a third party? I'm just curious.
There's a mix. I think you see a lot of municipalities running them, but obviously there have been some, through the RFP process, there are organizations that bid them out to third companies as
Right.
well. But I think it's a pretty good mix.
Okay. One last question. I know Ms. Webb, she's very passionate about, I think, I don't want to say lower level, but the level 1, 2, and 3 maybe teams. It seems to me, based on your presentation, that there's certainly room and opportunity to create multiple swim teams and maybe even develop some synergy between the different organizations so that they can accomplish a common goal.
Did y'all
kind of kick that around? too?
Right. Well, there are at least two club swim teams in town right now. The YMCA has a club, and then the Columbus Hurricanes have a club. But if you look in Atlanta, there are several clubs there, and they, like I point out, the Cumming facility has 5 different clubs that use that facility, and it's the same size facility that we have here. So there's room for more clubs.
And it would be interesting to know, as you guys, I don't know if you asked them, but is there and I don't mean a pecking order, but it seems to me there'd be one, and we talk about an anchor tenant kind of deal, that takes a leadership role in trying to help find innovative ways to run the facility. So I guess that would naturally materialize as the clubs are formed, right?
Right. I agree.
Well, thank you. You guys did a great job.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
All right, Mr. City Manager.
All right. I, too, want to thank the task force and the co-chairs for their great work. Next, we've got Deputy City Manager Pam Hodge with Aquatic Center funding options. And we do have Holly Browder here. She's the Assistant Director of Parks and Rec, and Becky Glisson. So, Deputy City Manager.
I just want to spend a few minutes tonight going through some of the funding options, but first I wanted to talk about the RFP process. I believe Councilor Allen asked about this at the last meeting, and there was an RFP done in February of 2015. We received the proposals in March. The committee met between April and July to review the proposals. They had vendor presentations in August, and the committee voted to recommend the highest ranked vendor in September. And then there were some options submitted by that particular vendor in October, and that's when the council presentations began, and that's because the vendor that was selected, the amount of the contract would exceed the budgeted dollars that were available in the Parks and Recreation budget. So that's kind of where we got to this point, was we have a vendor, but the contract amount would exceed the budget. And so that's where the discussion of reducing the hours or the operation to come within the budget of the Parks and Rec Department. The committee members, there were 3 voting members, 2 from Parks and Rec and 1 from, it was a previous member of the advisory committee and the past president of the Hurricane. So there was a voting member that was outside of the city. And then we also had non-voting members, 1 from Parks and Rec, 1 from Internal Audit, 1 from Finance, and 1 from the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. So we tried to make sure that on most of the RFP committees that we have a mix of all the parties interested in the RFP. During the previous meeting, Director Worsley talked about some of the funding options that we had identified as ways to meet the gap between the budget and what the contract would be. And tonight I just want to walk through a few of those, and Dr. Worsley will address some of the other operational funding options at the next meeting. So I'll draw your attention to this particular slide. I'm going to walk through items 1, 6, 7, and 11. They're not in any particular order, but these are just the options I'm going to walk through tonight as ways to make up that gap for funding. The first one being is to redirect a portion of the hotel motel tax. Each percentage, we have an 8% hotel motel tax, generates about $600,000. Currently, that's distributed between the Civic Center, the River Center, the Trade Center, and CCVB. So that is an option to fulfill the gap of about $450,000, $500,000 to continue the operation at the 89 hours per week that was currently being operated and run by the Parks and Rec Department. So that's one of the options. The second option is option number 6, and that's to eliminate the golf course subsidies. We currently subsidize the golf courses at about $300,000 a year out of the general fund, and so this is another option of how to fill that gap between the budgeted dollars and the contract amount. Option number 7 is to complete the transition of the after-school programs to the Muskogee County School District. Since 2011, they've taken over 6 of the after-school programs. That would be Allen, Britt David, Hannon, River Road, Blanchard, and Winton Road. And this would just continue that program, moving those after-school programs. We have 21 elementary schools and 5 middle schools that are continuing the oversight from Parks and Rec, and that would continue that. That would be a $300,000 operational reduction to continue to move these programs over to the school district. Option number 11 is to unfund Golden Park. Currently, we generate about $10,000 in revenue at Golden Park. Expenditures are almost $93,000. So this would provide a difference of about $83,000 that could go towards the operation of the aquatic center. At this point, I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if there's other options that you want to discuss, we can discuss those. Holly can help address some of the questions that you have on the other options.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you to go back to option 1. And we're really, as we've got 17 funding options on this list, and we know that some of them are non-starters, probably no discussion, and as we look at the 17, it would be helpful if you would say to us, number 3, 4, 5, or whatever is not, don't bring that back to discuss, because we don't intend to have a discussion on those. That would be helpful. But when we look at, like, option number 1, for example, I mean, it's been some time since we revisited the hotel motel tax distribution. And the one thing that's not on there is when we talk about Trade Center, they also get, in addition to the 1%, they get beer tax. And that's somewhere $730,000 to $750,000 beer tax that's not shown on there. And so these entities, obviously you know that the hotel motel tax goes to entities that would bring economic impact to the community. Well, the aquatic center is one of those, but we don't see the aquatic center on that list because you've not had a chance to get it on that list. And so, we need some direction as we go through these. Do you want to have some discussion about hotel motel tax distribution? Should 2% be go into the Civic Center, and should 1% be go into the River Center? Should 1% be go into the Trade Center? And obviously, we've got 4% to the CVB, and they, through them, the Sports Council gets 1% of that 4% as a pass-through to the CVB. And so a portion from each, or take something away from one of them and give it to the other where it's more appropriate. We need some discussion or direction. Is that something you want to talk about?
Okay. All right, we have counselors in queue. Counselor Thomas.
As I understand it, we're looking for, the goal you said is $500,000,
yes.
right?
Approximately $500,000, yes.
Okay. And Mr. City Manager, you hit on one of my questions that I wanted some conversation about do we cut the Civic Center, for example, all 2%, or do we just cut them 0.25%? Or, those kinds of discussions we need to have. And we also need to know then what will that do to, the Civic Center. If we cut them X amount, how will that impact their budget, and what will we see then? So it's that ripple effect that we need to be very cognizant of.
Well, and I can tell you, of course, the Civic Center, we are subsidizing the Civic Center roughly $300,000.
In addition to the hotel motel?
Yes, from the general fund. And so, I've had conversation with the Civic Center director, and like we want the Integrated Waste Fund to be an enterprise fund, and we want it to pay for itself. I've said to the Civic Center director, you need to pay for it yourself. And so he has been working to try and figure all that out. And so I do expect that he will come back with some options. The River Center is not a city organization, obviously, but they get 1%. And so I can't tell you how that might impact them. They are not quasi-city government. They are state.
Are they state?
Well,
Are they
parts.
private?
Well, they, $17 million from state went to the construction, I will say. And so if you take a portion of the 1% or all of the 1% from the River Center, I don't know how that will impact them. We'll have to get you that information. But Trade Center, as I said, they break even. We've not had to subsidize the Trade Center, but what you don't see up there is the $750,000 beer tax that they get. So when you consider $600,000 in hotel motel tax and $750,000 beer tax, they are pretty much equal to what the Civic Center is getting. So they're both, but the Civic Center is not breaking even. They are, and then of course the CVB, pretty much they are 1% goes to the Sports Council. What would happen if you take a portion of Sports Council and CVB is really the mandated agency for economic impact hits and bids. So, but that's just a summary of Civic Center, Trade Center, River Center, and then CVB with Sports Council included in there. And we can bring you more detailed information on those, but it's on the table for discussion if you say it's on the table.
And I guess my point is we need to be careful that we don't, for example, cut the Civic Center and then over here when we do their budget, we got to make up from somewhere else what we cut them because,
I agree.
That kind of stuff we need to be very careful about.
Yes.
The other question that I had was Mr. Abeka talked about cutting the hours from 89 to 77. Do you have an idea of what that would save, what that financial impact would be?
I think we would have to figure that because that 77 we just heard that number because we tried to stay out of.
Well, I thought Becky just gave us a number.
She said around 30.
Around 30,000?
We discussed it last night with the task force, is the reason I know.
Okay. Well, you need to come to the mic if you're going to talk.
When you get to, it's going to cut 12 hours from the budget, and the 12 hours is mostly going to consist of the part-time staff, the lifeguards and such as that. It's not really going to touch your utilities or your chemicals or your operating. And so it's going to be about $30,000 in lifeguard costs that we won't need to cover for those 12 hours per week.
But you will have some reduction in your utilities and your supplies, would you not?
We would have to speculate on
Right.
Yeah.
I can't
reduction in
give you that.
utilities.
It would be
Yeah.
very minor because
Yeah.
the facility, as I explained to the task force, the facility is a LEED facility, and I got with Georgia Power when we started doing all these reductions, and it would be a very minor reduction based on how it's already.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be approximately 30,000.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor.
So,
Okay, there's other counselors in queue. Did you want to
okay,
add
well,
something
no,
to that?
if it's on that, I wanted to go to a
the
couple
next
of the
one?
other options that.
Okay,
the
let's
deputies-
call up a counselor and see if they want to talk about option one or want you to go forward. Counselor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor. A question just occurred to me, talking about the savings. What what revenue would you lose for those hours you're going to close too? I mean, there would be an impact there as well.
And I don't think that we.
That would be hard for us to target, excuse me, because it would be based on which hours are actually decided on which days. So for example, the easiest example to give would be Sundays. If we closed all day on Sundays, then we would lose any memberships that would come in, people who would only be able to use it on Sundays. We would also use the revenue that we generate by renting out the rooms or the facility for birthday parties and other events and things of that nature, so we'd lose a little bit there. But it's really hard for us to be able to tell you what that would be.
Seems like by now you should have what revenue is generated by hour during the week. I mean, you should be able to calculate that pretty quickly.
Somewhat, but it varies on the rental side. Because it's, for example, maybe every weekend is not rented. You have some weekends that are, some weekends that are not.
But you would know.
So it would fluctuate, yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
a ballpark number. Mr. City Manager, to answer your question on which ones to bring back, this counselor feels like number 2 is not necessary. I mean, you get through all these, now some of these things are going to happen anyway. Some of these things are goals, long-term goals that the city is headed towards, such as shifting the community schools over to the school system. I applaud you for that, and I think that's a lofty goal, but I think that might be something that's going to happen anyway and not tied directly to the funding of the aquatic center. In my mind, the best alternative, the least impactful to other agencies in the city would be number 1. I think if we get somebody to look at the numbers, and I was just kind of thinking maybe get the auditor to go to each one of these venues and sit down and look at which could best afford, say, 25% or 30% or 10%, whatever that number comes out to. I like your idea of the beer tax. I think that would be an area to look at. We're looking at trying to get a quick fix here, and I think that if we explore those areas, it would give us the quickest result with potentially the least negative impact on a few agencies within the city. But that would be my recommendation or my thought.
Would it be appropriate, so we can get down to getting you the information that you want about the things you want to hear, maybe mentioning some of the ones that are priorities that you'd like us to come back on? We've got number 1.
I vote for number 1. I'll
Okay,
make a
come back on
motion. If
number
you're
one.
looking for a motion,
Yeah.
I'll make a
And I'll
motion that we
second it.
go for
Okay.
number 1.
All right, then let's, all those in favor of coming back with a, wait, okay. Wait.
No, there'll be more people. You gotta go around and ask.
Yeah.
Okay, what?
Just
So,
to look at, to see what affected it would be.
what's that?
Which ones we want to eliminate.
No.
And I don't want
That wasn't.
To eliminate.
No, I understand that. It was to focus on option 1. Is that correct?
No, it was going to have counselors go down and say which ones they want us to come back on.
With
I mean, work all of these would take months.
No, I understand that, but I thought we just made a motion
To
to,
bring back number
Bring back
1 with
number
further
1.
information.
as long as there's further information, because what concerns me is we have to know the impact. We have to understand the impact, and we're operating under the premise, and, I hope these folks know how gung-ho we are behind an auditorium, but my feeling is that there's going to be a little bit taken from everywhere, including the auditorium, and we have to factor in some of the ideas that this group has brought to us. We have to factor in the fact that they now think that it's possible to operate at 77 or 72 hours, whatever it is. I don't have a problem with looking at any of these. I really don't. I like the fact that the city manager is making a recommendation of the ones that they think make the most sense. I'd say bring them all back, and bring them back with some more information on what the impact is going to be to each one of these individual areas. And then let's look at them, and then we'll start weeding them out.
Well, and I want to make clear that we intend to bring them all back. We were just. Yeah,
Want to make sure there's nothing
we're
we want to
bringing
pull.
you 3 or 4, not in any particular order tonight. We know that we can't go through 17 tonight.
No.
And so we're just going to bring them in any order, and so, but we do intend to touch on all 17.
Well, I think that the other point that I wanted to make is, I'm not looking at reducing the Cooper Creek tennis hours. I mean, that, to me, that doesn't appeal. Also, you've got closed the Fox and Edgewood Senior Centers. That doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
I think on here as well is closing, privatizing Britt David Pottery Studio. That does not appeal to me.
Well, and Council Allen, that's why I was saying, I think there's going to be agreement on most of those you just named. We just need you to tell us, and
But if,
But I mean,
Yeah, but if only-
closing the Rigdon and Shirley and the Solomon Road pools, closing them,
Well,
it's
see-
not an option. I mean, you can limit the hours.
well, see, that came from around the table from someone.
I don't remember that, but anyway,
yes, it did.
What we said around the table was cut the hours, not close them completely.
yeah, I mean, there's some things on here that are yeah.
No,
No.
it did not.
Well, we got the video,
It did
so
not.
I mean, we can
Yeah,
go
we got
and
the
look.
video.
Well, listen,
And I think
You
I've,
go look at the video, but what we said was cut the hours, not close them completely.
well, we'll check it out.
All right, so, and I understand it, and one of the things I think we're just trying to do, because we're having a good conversation here, is that, and this typically happens, one counselor speaks up because they're impassioned and they say, these are the things that are important and I'd like to hear more about it. We really don't hear from anybody else. Everybody's just saying, okay, fine. And then we come back with information. Well, where's the one? Well, so we're just trying to get a little bit more input. If there's something, we've heard from one counselor that he thinks should be taken off the list, and I think that's why we were going to vote, but we don't have to vote. So is it the consensus that we come back on all 17? Okay, no. So how would you all propose we winnow this down then? What would you think would be an effective way to kind of hone in on the most, well, anybody, well, we can always vote, or we can go around however you'd like to see, but we just like a little bit of consensus because we do get a bit whipsawed.
Was trying to do, we're gonna still be here 2 hours from now, talking about the same thing, and still not knowing what we want you to bring back.
Okay. All right. So that's another voice, if you will, for wanting to winnow it down some. Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want anybody to get mad. Let's just talk a little bit. Last week it was $450,000 we were looking for. This week it's $500,000. What, I mean, where did the extra 50 come from?
We had $500,000 on there last week.
I believe the target was 450, if I'm not mistaken, with a
we-
little bullseye on it.
Well, I don't know that I brought the presentation.
This list was
last
from the
week.
last time.
I have the targeted.
This one right here?
Yes,
Yeah, this is-
441.
We gave you this last time.
No, you gave us this last week.
No,
You
we
had
gave you
this
this
last
too.
week, too.
I had this last week. I didn't have that.
Yes, you did. It was put on the screen.
I had it on here, Mayor. It's on here.
Yeah,
okay?
we
It's
passed
not-
this-
But you're looking at one slide, and there was another slide that was put on the screen.
I've
So-
got what you got in your
Explain to
hand.
Councilor Davis the difference between the bullseye and the 500,000. What's the difference? Are you just rounding up, or
I
what are you
think
doing?
it's just it was just a rounded up. We're looking for approximately a discrepancy of about $500,000. And I think the target, the third-party 89-hour target was 441,247, and the
Right.
Parks and Rec 89-hour target was 416. So
Right.
we're looking at around
Well, I rounded it
450
off
to
to
$500,000.
Okay, so we've got an extra 50 on there now.
Presentation on it.
So anyway, I just want to know that, okay? The other thing is that, we're not even talking about the revenue component that was introduced tonight or the revenue component. Currently, without looking at the revenue coming in, we've got revenue coming in.
In FY15, the revenue that was generated was $215,000.
215.
On the aquatic
Is
center.
that in, do you subtract that from that $500,000?
No, that's, what we're
That's in
looking
it,
at is the
that's-
budgeted dollars in FY16 and in FY17. The
Okay.
revenue is general fund revenue, and it was budgeted.
Okay, the money you're requesting, the target, which is 500,000. Okay, at the end of the day, when all the expenditures and revenues added up, the revenues added into the equation, that number is 500, okay.
The number that's 500,000 is the difference between the amount that's budgeted for the operation of the aquatic center and the amount of the contract or the amount
understand.
that's
That's what we're trying to
required
find. I
by the
understand
Parks
that.
and Rec Department. If there's additional revenue that's generated, then that is definitely an offset to the $500,000.
That would be
But it does
subtracting it.
include
Wait a minute,
revenue.
Mayor, if I
It
may.
includes.
It includes
the-
existing revenue.
It includes the existing 200,000, but if there are additional revenues generated, then that
Okay.
would impact the
It
$500,000.
would, I go back to what I originally asked. That would come off the 500,000. It would be subtracted, right? Yes or no?
Additional revenue,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thank you. What were the last 2 months' operating cost of the pool? What did it cost the city to run the pool last month and the year before?
You have those? I don't know that we
Well,
brought
if you
the
tell us
months
what,
of
Y'all don't-
operation.
not off the cuff. I mean,
Y'all
you
don't
tell
keep
us-
track of that? Y'all don't keep track of that by the month, how much it costs?
Yes, we do. We don't have it here tonight.
Well, you got the accountant right there.
She doesn't have our documents.
Well, what was it
Well,
in James's PowerPoint last week? Do you have that with you, where he set out what the costs were? and
That's a
what the
valid
revenues were?
question. That's a very valid question.
We can get you an answer.
Okay, let's
Well,
take a break. Let's take a
I'm
break.
not
Counselor
finished,
Davis
Mayor.
wants some
I'm
information.
not
See if
finished,
y'all can
Mayor.
find it, and we'll put it up.
Okay, my next question is, Ms. City Attorney, does the city reserve the right to pull back an RFP or re-request or amend the requirements of an RFP, the specifics of an RFP?
Well, the general rule is on a sealed bid or an RFP, you have the right as council to reject any and all proposals once they come in. And even when you have a final one recommended to this body, you can still reject any and all proposals and go back to the drawing board.
Okay, thank you. All right, now, I go back to what I said earlier. Look, the pool is the city's, and there's got to be oversight and expectations regardless. So we've got to have people that are involved in this. Ms. City Manager, you know, in reality, what you're asking tonight is impossible for 10 people here to start whittling at all these costs. I personally would prefer you, the deputy city managers, the director of Parks and Recs, to go to a room somewhere and kind of start hashing that and bring us more options. What we said last week, what I said last week, was we didn't have to close all these things. We could just kind of whittle away, refine them, and make it the least seamless, painless possible solution. Come up with that so we can try to find that now $500,000. That's what would be ideal, but there's no way we're going to be able to solve that tonight. I can't sit here. It's impossible to sit here and go through this and whittle away at all these things you asked. That's not my job.
I'm not looking for you to solve it tonight. I'm
Well,
looking
you
for
asked
to
us
give,
to.
I'm looking for you to give direction,
Okay.
and the direction would be, city manager, here's the hotel motel tax, and I think I'm getting that from Councilor Allen. That's what
Well,
he's
look,
given.
like Councilor Henderson said, without additional, we don't have the additional information. You guys do. You can hash this out in the room somewhere and figure it out.
We
I don't know what
have it.
impact's
We
going
have
to
to
be
go get it.
to these other agencies, but I think you can take a little bit here and there and still come up with that money. And then the revenue options that were talked about tonight, you're very close to that number. Now, you know, look, we can either, what was brought to us, like I said, we can go in the reserve or we can go in the general fund and get the money. But that's not an option. That's going to make your job tougher. Or we can take option number one, which I got 2 that was up there, that you could take a little bit from everything. I can't sit here and tell you that tonight, but take a little bit from everything and whittle away and see if you can get closer to that $500,000, all right? We talked about the change in hours tonight. The change in hours doesn't change the cost of operation. If you look at this, the cost of operation, the way it was explained to us from A and B, 89 hours to 56 hours is about $180,000, $190,000 you're talking about. It costs over $1 million to run at 56 hours. So you run it at 77 hours, you're still at that over $1 million to run the pool. So, you're still going to have to, cutting the hours doesn't give you that option. You're still going to have to find a way to come up with the $500,000 that you're talking about. Now, I think what I said earlier, and that can be done. I feel confident that can be done if council wants to do that. But there's more information that we have now on the table. And, quite possibly the right thing to do is to put an RFP back out to go ahead and not approve the options on the table and put an RFP back out with the requirements and specifics of what we're looking for, and maybe identify the hours and what we're looking to do it for, maybe budget, and what we're looking to do it for, and then to see if somebody will come back meeting our requirements and the specifics that we put out there. And another component that I would add to that is a clear understanding of the marketing and the sales aspect of that, and what additional revenue they plan to bring to the table, because all these proposals we have doesn't talk about any additional revenue. We heard additional revenue comments tonight of what could happen, but all these proposals have no additional revenue.
Well, and let me just say,
and you might be surprised.
Yeah. The RFP had additional revenue, and it was in the PowerPoint presentation Dr. Worsley showed us 2 or 3 times.
Yes.
So I think if you could get us the RFP that was published, that showed what people were responding to related to hours and marketing and programming and all that kind of thing, then people could see. Also, I'm having them pull up the PowerPoint so we can see Dr. Worsley's prior PowerPoint, which relates to the amount of revenue that has been generated in the past and is anticipated to be generated, because those numbers are in the bullseye figures, and then that way council can see those again. But the marketing was part of the RFP, because that's already been presented to us, exactly what they said. As I recall, this company A, whoever that is, had estimated quite a healthy amount of revenue, and it was an amount of revenue that we had never seen, and that the original company, of course, came nowhere near, and that Parks and Rec had estimated something different. So you would be betting on the come if you went with those, balancing the budget on their revenue projections.
Madam Mayor, with all due respect, this is what was given to us last week and the week before, and I will be glad to show you there's no revenue listed on this report. That's all I have to go off of. That's why I asked.
Pam, why don't you show us where the revenue is?
Well,
you can put it over
Can you
here.
pull up the
You can put it
February
up there.
9th one? The February 9th, on the bottom, if you look at, and I can put it up on the screen over here.
Yeah,
Okay.
somebody put it up over there. Zoom in, yeah. You're right.
Turn this mic on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's on now.
Okay, so at the bottom of this is the 89-hour option that compares Company A with the city, and the last line is the revenue projection. They projected, Company A, that they could generate $525,000 in revenue if the pool was open for 89 hours. Parks and Rec's number was $250,000, and that's based off of the information that they have of the knowledge of the operation of the pool. And like I said, for FY15, the revenue that was generated was $215,000. So there are revenue numbers that were in the presentation based on the hours of operation. So I think they provided 89 hours, because we did go back to them and we said, okay, well, here's our budgeted dollars. How much could you operate based on these? And that's where the 45 hours came from. And then they also provided us a projection at 56 hours and the revenue that would be generated based on the reduced hours.
Well, if a new RFP goes out, let's make sure that the revenue projections are on there as well. And I agree with you that it coincides with the $500,000 and the question I asked a minute ago. But you just told me that it's to be subtracted from the $500,000.
Right, and if the
All right.
company coming in, Company A, could actually generate 525, then obviously there would be a difference. We're budgeting approximately 200,000 in revenue for the aquatic center, and if they brought in 500,000, then that's obviously a $300,000 difference and would impact the funding that's required. But I would hate to
Well-
budget for something that's unknown, because the previous company that was running it also provided us some pretty significant revenue projections, and they didn't meet those. Now, we didn't budget for those, but their RFP and their proposal also said they were going to generate a lot of money, and it didn't happen. So,
Well, thank you. The part I've been struggling with on this whole thing is the labor model. I'm still not convinced that we need all the personnel costs to run the pool. I think that's where most of the costs are here. My recommendation would be to not approve the proposal that's on the table and put out the RFP for another 3 weeks, have specific guidelines of what our expectations are, see what we can do it for whatever the amount is.
Well,
Maybe we could do it for our budget.
we
And then I would also add the marketing, an expectation and a description of the marketing sales to make sure that we know what they're doing, and then all revenues projected.
Well, if we were going to do it, certainly it wouldn't be done in 3 weeks. The process is just longer than that. And so what we're going to need, if the council wants to vote, because you can refuse any and all bids. Yeah, and so I hear that from you, and so if we don't get a vote to refuse, I don't know what to do.
Well, and also,
You know?
I don't know, the RFP, we need to see it, because it was, as I recall, like 3 pages long. So it obviously had some specificity in it. And then there were people who asked questions, and they, so one of the vendors would write in and say, I want to know more about what kind of programming you want, and then our vendor people would get together and respond some more. So there was great specificity. Before we start saying we want additional specificity, and for council to direct what specificity, I think we need to see what the RFP was.
I absolutely agree, Mayor.
Yeah.
And she just said to me, came over to me and said, everything he's asking for is in the RFP. Everything you're asking for. And so
I think
we actually need to bring it forward.
Well,
to share it with you.
when I say specifics and what we request, maybe you put in there a dollar amount that you want to operate that pool by, and to see if anybody can operate that pool within that dollar amount, and then have the other items listed too. That was not in the RFP before.
Well, aren't we supposed to be getting bids?
Well, there's a process that we go through. And, I mean, I wish we were in the private sector. We could just do it just like you said, but we're not.
Well, I just asked the city attorney what we're capable of doing.
And so, but an RFP will do, we can tell them the money that we're operating, and then they can tell us what they can do for the money. We can do that. But.
Why wouldn't you?
But we're going to need to, that's what they told us. They told us, for the money we've got, if we can get you 45 hours.
Well, and I think just for the public's sake, like I said before, I think sometimes it's good to sleep on these things and you start learning a little bit, but I think with the information that's come in the last week or two, and that, it just gives you a different understanding, a different look at what the possibilities could be.
Well, I tell you what, I think so that we can move this along, we probably need to bring the vendor, the preferred vendor back and let you make a decision. We need to do that, and that way we will at least know whether you want to move forward with it or throw it out and start over.
Well, at this point, Mr. City Manager, I wouldn't be in favor of bringing a vendor in here.
No, I didn't say bring a vendor in here, bring the preferred vendor name forward like we do in all RFPs.
I think you put it back out to everybody and see what you come up with.
Well, you got to refuse it
You got to
first.
reject it.
Or you can reject what's on the table and then put it back out to everybody.
Yeah, if it's
Well,
rejected, then we can do
As
it.
city attorney,
I'll let the
is that
city
possible?
attorney,
Well, he's still, city manager, yeah, the city manager still has to present it to this body.
I don't understand. Well,
No.
James is, or
You still have to present the highest recommended bidder or proposer to the council as a body, and then the council can decide whether to accept it or reject all proposals.
well, we'll be guided by the city attorney in whether we bring it to you or not. But to move forward tonight, what I would like to do, so that we can move on tonight, is, there's 17 things on the list, and Mr. City Attorney, unless there's some legal reason why I can't just send the list to each council member, and they can check yet it's not a vote, but yes, I'm interested in hearing more about this one, or no, I'm not, and that way I know what to bring back and what not to bring back. Okay. Okay, well then,
All right, well, let's just move forward with all 17, and just, it
Okay,
takes us
well,
what
that's
it
fine.
takes us. Kind of like we did with the insurance, where it took us 4 or 5 months. We'll get there.
so we've heard about the number one, and so the other one I wanted to mention, just for clarification, on the child care after school, before school program. You heard the deputy city manager say that we were in all of those schools prior to 2011. And in 2011, they chose to transition 6 of the schools that we have to the school district, that they operate at the schools. So 6 of what we were dealing with, we didn't say come and get them. We thought we were going back into those schools, and they decided they wanted to go a different direction with those 6 schools. And so now we have 21 elementary schools and 5 middle schools left. And the word that I've been getting is that they're going to transition other schools at their own pace. And so the proposal that's on this list is to just, let's not do it through the rest of this school term and through the summer, but and we talk to them about it now so that they can budget starting school in August of next term, August of 17. The school district will know that we would not be in any of the schools, that they would, of course it's their schools where we're holding this child care after school before, and so they would be able to do for the remaining schools what they've done for the 6. And so that would save us $300,000, because the schools that they opted to take over, I mean, you can look at the list and see what they are, which schools they are. And
that's option 7.
And so, yeah, that's the option 7. So I'm not suggesting that we do away with the child care before after school. The suggestion is that we go ahead and transition the rest of the schools and let them do what they've done for the 6 that they've already moved over on their own without being pushed or asked. They chose to do it. And so that's the recommendation.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, a couple things. One, I've got different counselors want to talk about the different items you have here.
Sure.
And so, and some of them have been in queue for a long time.
Okay.
So since you're 2 or 3, can you go ahead and do 6 and 11 very quickly? You've already done 1 and 7. Do 6 and 11, and then I'm going to open it up for the queue that they've been waiting in,
Well,
instead of allowing them to hopscotch over one another.
6 would be the same conversation that I've shared with you that I had with Ross about the $300,000. The same conversation I shared with you earlier that I had a conversation with the Civic Center director about the $300,000 that's coming from the general fund to support